G&T show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. Live long and prosper, bitches.
Are friends with benefits?
Speaking of having a good time, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Dayton broke the G&T show. This is now the David Mack
Appreciation Hour. You assholes.
What is it about this guy that people love him so much? With his purple velvet cape and his crown. I thought it was a little much when he had us carry him in the studio on a throne. I am awesome! Look what I have done! Look what I have brought upon the world!
There is an urge to go nya.
I heard rumors that you might be working on something else, but we won't prod much. I was gonna say
I'm gonna pry a little.
Dare you! How dare you ask me to change it? Do you not understand the majesty of my genius? And the guy sitting next to me looked at me like he was, like I'd cramped in his hat.
Yeah, it's the professionalism that sells the show. That's right.
And good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning. Happy twilight, happy dawn, wherever you are. Welcome to another G&T Supplemental Log. I'm Gettysburg 7. There she is to my left, your right. She's wearing her Anovos Trek uniform today for this interview from the original series, Terry.
Hello, everyone.
And because he got confused, he's wearing his Battlestar Galactica outfit. It's Ceridium.
Kapla!
And we are joined today by, we call him the Fifth Beatle, one of our favorite people to interview, the author of These Are the Voyages, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, the great Marc Cushman. How are you?
Hi, Nick, and I'm wearing my Beatle boots.
Nice. And joining us on a day today where news broke that Simon Pegg is co-writing the third Star Trek movie.
I know, that's just very interesting to start off the show with. It's kind of like, wow, there's some interesting news.
Well, not the third Star Trek movie, the third J.J. versus Star Trek movie.
Right, the third new Trek film. There you
well,
go.
they just threw out a script, right?
Right, and apparently they threw out the writers with it, which was kind of a shock, I think, all of us.
Yeah, we were thinking that they were going to, when they got rid of...
Now, in Hollywood, we usually do throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
And they don't have to pay him any further money if they just start fresh.
You know, since we have you on, Mark, and this is your milieu, what? How, yeah, this close to thank you. This close to production of the film because it's due out in what 18 months?
Yeah.
We were surprised that they would have thrown out the script before or after, or right around the time that they set a date.
Yeah. And it's a hard date because meaning it's a firm date because it's for the 50th anniversary. They're not going to want to miss that.
Right.
But it can easily be done. Hollywood takes years to make a movie because Hollywood's allowed to take years. But you look at some of the best movies ever made, and they were made very quickly. Wrath of Khan was done very quickly. Star Trek: The Motion Picture took forever. Which one's better?
Interesting.
True.
So I guess I never realized that. I didn't think of Wrath of Khan as being a rushed film.
But there's two words that explain why Wrath of Khan was able to do it.
Nicholas Meyer.
Yeah, because
and I crossed myself as I said his name.
And when they hired him, they were planning on doing it as a TV movie. Paramount had one of the biggest hits of the year with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, but because the reviews were so indifferent, they just weren't sure. They thought, well, look how many years it took them to do it in the first place. They just couldn't figure out that, wait a minute, we got a hot property here. They kept thinking, and I'm working on a fourth book, by the way.
Oh my God.
And all the memos coming across and everything, the whole thinking process was, well, we have the number one show in syndication this year, but it'll probably burn out because there were only 3 seasons. So by next year, nobody's going to care. And by the time we get a movie made, it'll lose money. And they kept thinking this year after year after year, and yet the show just got more and more popular. So it comes down to 1978 or 77, and the show is so popular in syndication, they finally said, okay, we got to go for it. And yet it took them forever to make it. And so Wrath of Khan now, it comes out, it makes a fortune, and yet they instead of going right into another sequel and saying, okay, we know we're going to do it, let's get busy, they waited almost 2 years before making a decision whether they're going to make a sequel. And the minute they make a decision, it's like, well, we need it tomorrow. And so let's do it as a TV movie. And so Nick Myers and who's the guy that produced it? Can't think of his name right at the moment. Art Bennett. Thank you. They got a script together very quickly, and everybody was so excited about the script that suddenly Paramount says, oh, well, maybe we should do this as a theatrical release. And yet they still shot it fast. They shot it with the TV unit and did it in record time and had it edited in record time. They were filming that thing in the fall of, I think, 81, and it was out by summer of 82. So they didn't take a year and a half to do the special effects. They did them all in about 6 months.
Wow.
Interesting.
So it's really remarkable what they can do and how fastly they can do it when they're properly motivated. And it may turn out better than something they spent too much time thinking about.
True. But my concern, or some of our concerns, is, the time required for all of these big budget, special effects that the JJ films have become known for.
Yeah. Well, what they may do is they may spend more attention to character.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh, my. My mind is blown.
Golly, we just don't have enough time to do all these special effects. We can't make it a giant light show, so let's make it a really good story.
And if there's one thing that I have to personally say, I'm personally very fond of pretty much all of Simon Pegg's writing work because he is so character-based. I mean, the special effects of his films are cheap, and it doesn't matter because you care about what the people are saying and how they're reacting and what they are. So I all of a sudden there's a sparkle of hope regarding a focus on character that I never really had before.
Well, I really believe this for years now. I've been saying this to anybody who will listen. It's usually just the people who live around me. But my favorite movies are small movies these days. The bigger the budget, the longer they take to make it, the worse it is. Yeah. And the smaller the budget and the quicker it's shot, the better it is because they don't have time to mess it up. Hollywood will mess it up if they have enough money and enough time to do it. This being a race to the big screen, to the finish line, it might actually turn out good.
Boy,
not to say the other two weren't good. I enjoyed both of those.
Oh, yeah, so did we.
But they could have been a lot better if they had less money and less time. And less
one of the things you're talking about is, and Kevin Smith talked about this when he was working on the Superman movie that never got made, was, just the input that was coming in, and he eventually left because the producer was insisting that the third act have a giant spider in it, and he was saying that we don't need a giant spider for Superman, and it became a real bone of contention. And then a couple of years later, Kevin Smith is watching the Will Smith, I'll say it, terrible movie, and I don't like to say that about Will Smith's movie because he is America's actor, Wild Wild West, and lo and behold, what shows up on the screen?
It's a big giant spider.
A giant mechanical spider, and it's the same producer. Yeah. And why do I love Kevin Smith movies like Clerks and the small movies? Because they're small character driven movies.
Right.
Well, Nick, look at the real Wild Wild West. Look at the first season, the black and white ones that was film noir, Western meets science fiction meets espionage show. James Bond in the Old West with spaceships.
It was truly the original steampunk.
Oh yeah, the ones that Fred Freiberger produced and then Gene Kuhn produced during that first year. And
I loved them.
They're brilliant, and they were written in a couple weeks each and filmed in 6 or 7 days and edited in 2 weeks, and they were on the air, and they're great.
Yeah,
so as I said, you don't need a lot of time. Here, this is a great segue into talking about book 3.
Yeah.
If you guys have read it yet or have gotten deep enough into it, you probably read the chapter about Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. Uh-huh. And 5 days before they were supposed to start filming that, in their second day of pre-production, the script by Gene Kuhn still involved a guy that looked like the devil and a guy that looked like an angel.
Right.
Director Judd Taylor said, this is too obvious. We know what it's going to be. What if we make them half white and half black and nobody's going to notice until we tell them to notice, but one will be white on one side of the face.
One side and the other.
So forth. And Fred Freiberger said, that's brilliant. And he turned to Arthur Singer and he said, start rewriting. And Arthur Singer said, but I'm rewriting 5 other scripts and so are you. And he says, yeah, but we got to get it done. And so they literally wrote that in 4 days, sent it to NBC 1 act at a time, which really ticked NBC off. They hated when they would do that. But they had to approve it based on the notes. And they were still rewriting it when they started filming it. They were having their first pass on the script, or second pass on the script. So you watch the episode and you go, okay, this one feels a little rushed. It feels like the script could have used a little more material. They're kind of stretching it with that chase through the corridors of the Enterprise. But they put that whole thing together in 5 days, and they had to do all the makeup tests and everything else. And it's an iconic episode.
It is.
Some people hate it, some people love it, but it's definitely iconic.
Well,
How can anyone hate an episode with Frank Gorshin?
Well, it was Frank Gorshin, but it was the episode that and I would think that a lot of kids or children who, were my age at the time when we saw it, I mean, it's the one that I still talk about when everybody says, what's the first Star Trek episode you ever remember? Well, it is, without a doubt, Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, because it was very simple, and it really did literally beat you over the head with its morality issues and its morality play. However, it was a stunning piece of work for a 5-year-old. This was something I truly understood. I took it to heart. I had a discussion with my uncle about it that night because I was so traumatized by this obvious stupidity of these 2 men. I don't get it. I don't understand why they hate each other. It makes no sense. And my uncle said, "You understand. You understand. They're not right. They're both wrong." And I was just, but it was an actually very traumatic experience for me because I was so offended by how just horrible they were.
Well, they destroyed their planet. Their planet everybody killed each other. Genocide.
Right, and it just
being down there, and there's nothing but burning cities left.
Right.
And also reading in book 3, plugging the book, you notice what I did in that chapter is I went through all the newspaper archives and I pointed out all the race riots that were going on in the months surrounding the writing and the production of that episode, and it makes the stuff that was hitting the news a few months ago look like nothing. I mean, just hundreds of cities in flames, and each one of them, the National Guard being sent in, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people being sent in to restore order, and hundreds to sometimes thousands of people being arrested, hundreds to sometimes thousands of buildings being burned down in each city, dozens of deaths.
On top of the fact that we were at the very beginnings of the real palpable problems that we were having in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Well, the whole country was coming apart, it seems, but, Star Trek definitely made commentary on Vietnam in episodes, and they made commentary on overpopulation and everything else, but that was the one they wanted to do, a really strong racial story, anti-prejudice story. And they tried to do it in the first season, as you read in book 1, about script Portrait in Black and White that Barry Trivers wrote, the guy who wrote The Conscience of the King. It was a Gene Roddenberry idea. And they had a complete screenplay, and NBC rejected it. Stan Robertson, who was black, rejected it, but he rejected it because he said, this is not going to play in the South. You can't have your landing party beam down to a parallel Earth pre-Civil War where blacks are the ruling race and whites are slaves and have them put in shackles and irons. We can't do that on NBC in 1966. So they waited and tried to get it made the following year, hoping things had changed enough in 1 year, and poor Gene Kuhn had to rewrite it, and they still turned it down. So the next year, he and Gene Roddenberry are meeting during the 3rd season, and Roddenberry's giving out those first script assignments, the first 16, not Fred Freiberger. And Roddenberry said, we always wanted to try to make that work, and he says, well, we can't, but here's a way we can comment on racism. We'll make it an angel and a devil. And it's still prejudice because you're prejudiced against the guy because of the way he appears. Well, Judd Taylor came along and found a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that briefing room scene where they do the reveal, and Kirk says, you keep referring to him as his kind. He's just like you. And he says, are you blind?
Yeah.
He's black on the right-hand side. I mean, it still sends a chill up my spine because,
you don't notice
before, it is simplistic, Terry, but, so is racial prejudice, so why not?
Yep, very, very much so.
I've been plugging away through the 3rd book these last few weeks, and I am absolutely loving what I'm reading. But one thing that I'm currently on Day of the Dove, so I'm not quite to Last Battlefield yet. But one thing that I had noticed was they encountered a lot of problems, especially early on, trying to get the episodes created. There was an actor strike at some point during, I think, was it Tholian Web or the one before it?
It was before that. It wasn't a strike as far as SAG is concerned, but it was a rebellion on the set. Is There in Truth No Beauty? Shatner and Nimoy refused. They just sat down and kind of did a sit-in, which was big, kind of a thing people were doing back then.
Right.
No violence. We're just going to sit here and we're not going to move and we're not going to go fight your war. And they just refused to do the scene until it was rewritten. And Roddenberry had rewritten it to offend them. So they made him come down. Fred Freiberger came to the set and they said, no, get Gene Roddenberry. He wrote this thing. Bring him in. And, Gene Lasetta-Rosta wrote the script, but Gene Roddenberry wrote the scene that was really bothering them. So Roddenberry had to come down and meet with them in front of everybody else, Diana Muldaur and the director, Ralph Sineski, and come to terms as far as how the scene was going to be rewritten so that they would be willing to perform in it. And it was getting that hairy.
Yeah, and then wasn't there a problem with the Empath as well?
Yeah,
I know that they went way over budget.
Well, they had a little mini rebellion on that one too. And by the way, they all liked both of these scripts, but that's why they did the rebellion, is because they did like them. And so, they cared. And they didn't want to let something go by that was substandard within a show that they thought could be a standout episode. So they had another little strike. This time it was Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley who refused to do the scene, as they had to redo the schedule and shoot some other stuff first and move the company to a different stage, and while they were changing the script around. And you're going to read another one coming up, For Whom Gods Destroy, a big one. That was the big blowout between Nimoy and Freiberger.
Wow.
So and Nimoy wrote what was called The Letter, and you'll see it in bold in the book, to Douglas Kramer, who was running Paramount TV at that point, just tearing the episode apart and tearing the script apart and saying why he wasn't going to do it. And it's kind of like that thing in book 2 where you read that, which even I was surprised to find this out in my research, that Nimoy almost didn't return to the series.
Yeah.
And they were threatening to sue him and keep him from working, and they cast somebody to take his place and everything else. So there was a lot of struggles that were going on. Now, it was a happy set, if you really think about television, there was a really good feeling on the set of Star Trek, and everybody got along pretty well, in spite of what you hear some people say now. That kind of came up later. But at the time, the cast was getting along fine, and everybody knew they were doing a special show. But when you're involved in something that everybody cares about so deeply, there are going to be moments of massive creative difference, and there will be periods of conflict that will come up.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was surprising that all of these issues were coming up in such a short amount of time early on, that it just seemed amazing that they managed to get anything done. And I appreciate the fact that you had brought back the quote unquote ticking clock in terms of the funding or the amount that each episode was going over. It really adds a bit of pressure, and it's like every time I read that little paragraph about it, it's like, oh no, not again.
Yeah, you see them going deeper into debt, and he's going to have to make up for that. In the previous 2 years, they really didn't. They ended both seasons 1 and 2 way over budget, and that's why Desilu went out of business.
Right.
But when Paramount came in Douglas Kramer's office, the mandate was, this is not going to happen. You are going to balance the books, or else heads are going to roll. So you're seeing those first several episodes of season 3 exceeding the budget. And you just know, poor Freddie Freiberger, that he's getting ready to have his head chopped off. If he can't find a way to turn it around and bring this thing back into budget, because they were literally, Douglas Kramer's people were coming down and pulling the plug. They were turning the lights off at 6:20. Where in season 1 and season 2, even though they were supposed to finish filming at 6:20, which was a 12-hour day, by the way, because people were showing up for makeup at 6:20 in the morning. So at 6:20 at night, they were supposed to be done, and that is a short day of production, 12 hours. We're used to 14, 15, 16, but they try to stop you at 12 so you don't have to pay overtime. But they always went late. Quite often went till 8, 9, sometimes 10 o'clock at night trying to get the last shots taken. But in the third season, boy, that came down. And have you guys read about the Tholian Web yet?
Yes, that was what I was going to ask or talk about next. They fired the director a couple days in.
Yeah, 3 days in, Ralph Sineski was called into Fred Freiberger's office and terminated. And what was worse is Douglas Kramer, and you guys see the news thing that he released of Daily Variety and Hollywood Reporter, made it sound like Sineski was really in the wrong and it had been irresponsible. And Sineski didn't work for about 2 years. He was such an in-demand director and such probably Star Trek's best director, most talented director. If you look at his episodes, incredibly talented. And really cared, and just brought a little something special into them. But he always ran about a half day late, and they just said, no, you're a quarter day behind and you're fired. And, the thing is Ralph was really surprised by book 3 because he's been angry at Fred Freiberger for 40 years for firing him. He didn't realize until he read this book 3 that it wasn't Fred, it was Douglas Kramer.
Wow.
But Fred was the guy who had to be the heavy. The buck stopped on his desk. He's the one who had to call Ralph in and say, you're fired, and he couldn't tell Ralph why. Well, because he didn't agree with the decision.
Right.
But as a producer, you don't talk down your bosses. You don't say, well, I don't want to fire you, but the asshole upstairs is telling me to. No, he just came in and said, I got to let you go. Ralph was saying, why? And he said, well, you're late. He said, but I'm not that late. I can catch up. He says, I got to let you go. And he just kind of held the line and took the blame. He let the buck hit his desk. And it's taken 47 years for the truth to come out and to find out that he wasn't the heavy. He was just being portrayed as the heavy.
Wow. That's really sad.
It is sad. I think you're going to feel a little bit of sadness by the time you finish book 3 because the struggle gets harder and harder. Bob Justman finally says, I can't take it anymore, and he leaves halfway through. Even if he says, you can make it to where I never work again, I'm out of here. I'm not going to watch you destroy this show anymore. You're killing us. You've cut the budget so horribly. We're trying to do a half a science fiction movie each week with the budget of a radio show. And
it was like 170-some thousand an episode.
Yeah, down from 198 in the first season. And inflation is making that money worth less, and people are getting raises and
because of their contracts.
And Paramount is nickel and diming them. They're charging Star Trek out of their budget for stage rental and things that Desilu never did do. So not only has the money been cut, but it's been cut in even more ways than you can imagine. So, Justman said, if we survive into a 4th season, it's going to be, each episode is going to be one long scene in the briefing room as they tell us about the story because that's all we can afford to do.
Right.
And at the same time, I don't know if you've gotten to this point in the book yet or not, but, the FCC came down hard and said, you got to get the violence out of the show. Now, this is an action-adventure show, and so they're being given directive by NBC to take the action out of the
action show.
So we all kind of looked at the 3rd season and said, well, it doesn't feel quite as good, and the pacing isn't quite as fast. And, well, they couldn't afford to do as many setups. Every lighting setup is money. Every set is money. So you're doing longer scenes in sets instead of shorter scenes. You're taking a lot of the fights out. You're taking, Day of the Dove, Mike, you said you're in the middle of that chapter.
Yes.
Script had them passing swords through bodies. All this stuff had to be taken out to where in one scene in the episode, instead of hitting a guy with his sword, Sulu gives a judo chop on a guy and knocks him down. Nobody gets killed, because NBC said we can't have people getting stabbed. So only one person, we only see one person get stabbed in that entire episode. It's a good rollicking episode, but it could have been so much more if they could have been a little more realistic with the action.
But yet that episode also has Chekhov threatening to rape a woman.
Yeah. In an earlier draft, it was Kirk who did that. And then they thought, no, we can't let Kirk do that. We'll let Chekhov do it.
Wow.
Let the Russian do it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they were very worried about that. So the censorship got tougher, the budget got tougher, the days got shorter, people were getting tired. Roddenberry left halfway through the third season, much more involved during the first half of that third season than he ever admitted.
He was in a completely different part of the studio, of the in a completely different office elsewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was still pulling a lot of strings, surprisingly.
Oh, that's the way to say it. Yeah, I mean, I love that one memo that he writes to Justman and to Freiberger, but he's talking about Freiberger in the third person, like he's not there. He's going to say, well, Fred Freiberger is going to let the cast know that we're not taking any nonsense and everything else. And so Freddie's reading this memo from Gene, where Gene's telling him how I want you to behave, how I want you to be. And then you find out from Fred, that nobody at NBC was returning his calls. Nobody would talk to him. He's trying to produce a show for the network, and nobody at the network will return his calls because they're so angry at Star Trek and so angry at Roddenberry at this point. Oh, it's just, writing it, researching and writing it, I felt exhausted for them. And I imagine you guys are feeling it reading it. But it does pick up at the end. There's a little bright ending, and because we all know Star Trek continues.
Now, I'm going to... love Star Trek continues. I'm going to say this for people, and I'm not saying this because Mark is here. We've said it when he's not around. If you even consider yourself a minor Star Trek fan, you owe it to yourself to read These Are the Voyages from Volume 1 and move forward. It is the...
It's enlightening. It is what it is to me. Every time you're going to laugh, and it's just me and Alan, okay? It's just the way we are. But Alan reads me a chapter in bed.
You still do that?
We do.
Oh
so Alan we're in the middle of, or I say towards the end of book 2. And, but that's how I like to listen to my husband read to me. All right. So he reads the book to me, and I'm loving everything. We haven't gotten to book 3 yet, but, I don't want to read it without him, and we kind of share it that way.
Well, you got to watch the episodes. Each chapter's an episode, and then watch the episode.
I will absolutely confess that it's been multiple times that we have read a chapter before we go to bed, or before we go to sleep, I should say, and then we move the next day. Instead of reading the next chapter, we'll actually watch the episode that we had listened or read about the night before. And it certainly puts a unique perspective on your viewing of the show. It definitely, in many episodes where I used to think, oh God, this was just a throwaway episode, they become far more interesting and much more riveting when you know the backstory of the players. It's just been so much fun, and your work is just so thorough and wonderful, and it's so easy to read and listen to, and we're having just the time of our lives reading it. We're really just having a really great time. And so all of our listeners know we love talking to you and having you on so we can talk about just how much fun it was and had to be for you to write all of this and to learn through all of it and to dig through all of the information that it was, left in your care. I'm so jealous.
I love the discovery. I love doing this kind of research, and especially because I love Star Trek, but I've really enjoyed doing it for other programs and other movies and things, articles that I've done where I get to go in and turn over stones and see what's underneath. Because you wonder, when you see an episode or a movie that's really good, you wonder where the great ideas came from. And when you see one that's not quite working, you wonder what went wrong, especially if it's part of a series like this where you can see how good it can be. And then you'll watch an episode like Alternative Factor or And the Children Shall Lead or whatever, and you go, well, what happened? Because they did a great one right before that, and they did a great one after that. What happened this week? And yet they try to do a great one every time out. But, sometimes it's that domino effect. Something just goes wrong, and usually that something was NBC. Saying, calling up the day that they started filming, or was it the day before? I think it was the day before they started filming the Alternative Factor, and saying, we just realized that this Janet McLaughlin, who we thought was Irish, is black. And she's got a love scene with John Drew Barrymore? No, you can't do that.
Wow.
You can't do that. The South won't play it. And you got to either fire her or you got to rewrite the script. And so Gene Coon said, I'm not firing her. I'm not going to fire her because she's black. So he went in and started rewriting the script. The morning they started filming, John Drew Barrymore is sitting in makeup reading the new pages and saying, I'm not going to do this. This isn't as good. I'm walking.
Right.
And then that whole domino effect starts going, and it's just, look out. And they're trying their damnedest to do a good episode, but everything's going wrong. So yeah, and it happens a lot in the third season.
Yeah. You were going to say something, Nick?
Well, I noticed Mark dropped a little Easter egg in there earlier, and if he thinks we didn't notice. So you're working on a fourth now?
That was my question.
I've
been saving it.
Now, I'm gonna ask this, and I'm dead serious about this. Is it about the animated series?
Yes.
Yes.
But not,
oh my
but
God!
Not only,
yes.
But not only.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I just had lunch with Dorothy Fontana a few days ago.
Oh, shut your nose.
Hero.
It's about the 1970s, you know? And because, see, I couldn't do a whole book on the animated series because you guys and you gal know I like to do long books. And things that'll take you a month to read.
Long time.
And the animated series was only 22 episodes, and there's no on-the-scene stories to be told. And the scripts were written pretty quickly, and there wasn't as much rewriting and everything else. So it wouldn't satisfy you if that's all it was. You'll be very, very interested in the things that I'm finding about the animated series. Very interesting. But if that was all the book was, I think you'd feel a little disappointed. So it's about the 1970s because, you know, this started out as the last chapter for book 3. And when it got to be about 100 pages, Sue Osborne said, that's not going in the book. She's the one who had to, like, edit this stuff and go through it and say, Mark, you're going on too long on this. Let's cut this one down and so forth. And she said, there's no way we're going to be able to cut this down. The book 3 is already the biggest of the 3 books. And this chapter alone, I think we were up to like page 80. I was, and I wasn't even done.
We need a forklift to carry this book 3? Good Lord, Mark.
And so I said, well, then it's going to be book 4. And the reason that last chapter started getting so big is again, because of the research. You know, I just started saying, okay, I need to wrap this story up. Let's find out what happened as Star Trek's winding down after they've been canceled and the last episode's been filmed. And the stuff I was finding, I just blew me away. I said, okay, this requires further looking into. And I'll tease you. I'll drop another Easter egg because just hearing this doesn't mean anything. You got to read it. You got to see the memos, and you got to really get into it to find out how it could happen. But NBC wanted the show back less than a year after they canceled it.
Really?
What?
And they tried to get it back, and they went back to Paramount in 1970 and said, we want it back on prime time, the cast, everything. Let's have it. And Paramount said no. And so they tried it. They said, ask us again next year, and NBC did. And they asked again the year after that, and they asked again the year after that. And that's when they got the animated series, because Paramount wasn't going to give them Star Trek back because they were making so much money with the reruns. Some nitwit down there at Paramount said, well, if we put the show back on prime time once a week, I guess people won't watch the reruns. And this guy didn't get fired.
It's just more to rerun.
Hollywood logic is...
Especially then, Nick. Especially.
Oh, I know.
So, you know,
NBC is the same network that put on Hello, Larry. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And only the 3 of us probably get that reference.
And I know that there's a lot of Dolly Parton lovers out there, but they're doing a Dolly Parton series. I just want to just bang my head against it. Oh. Okay, sorry.
So now you watch Terry. It's going to be really good.
Oh, you know,
I
just to eat my words, they'll make it happen. Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so the 4th book is going to be on the 1970s. So I imagine that's going to deal with the animated series, syndication. Are you going to be talking about conventions at all?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of sort of got...
Here, okay, in a nutshell, so here's what it is. It's the explosion of Star Trek. Now, as we find out in books 1 and 2 and 3, the ratings are not as bad as we were told. I've gotten some kicked a few times on some chat rooms where they say, you know, what's Cushman talking about? I've got every damn Nielsen report here, and anybody who's in the neighborhood can drop by and see them.
Well, you know, Mark, you have, let me state the initial. You have caused me rage. Now, let me explain. When I still see articles coming out today talking about how the ratings were bad, and I'm screaming at my screen, no, read Cushman's book. It's right there. The numbers are right there.
Every Nielsen report and TVQ reports and Arbitron reports, and they're all there. And unfortunately, I've come across some additional ratings information that I didn't have when I did these books that people said, well, the highest it ever finished a season was number 52. And I thought, well, how can that be? Because here it is winning its time slot, and it's got a 30-something audience share, but I didn't have a report.
Second place, if not first.
Yeah, and TVQ showing it that it's in the top 5 and everything else of all the shows, but I didn't have a Nielsen report that showed how they all stacked up. And now I got a couple on one of them. It's number 22 in the weekly Nielsen out of all the primetime shows. So, it's if we ever revise these books, I'll put those reports in too. But we're not planning on revising. Don't wait. I'm meeting with CBS on Friday.
Tell them we said hi.
They're talking about a 3-book set for the 50th anniversary, so you never know. But that's a long ways away.
Why don't you just Mark, why don't I just send you my checkbook?
Seriously, right?
And I don't think it's going to happen. I think what the 3-book set would be the 3 books as they now are, with maybe a little supplemental thing that would be in there as part of the set. That would be something new. Like we've got some new colored pictures from the Matt Jeffries collection that we could have. A nice little photo book of amazing shots that I'd never seen before, plus some of this new Nielsen information and everything else. So I think what I would rather do is just have a supplemental thing that you could have. Because I don't want people getting angry at me for changing anything in the books.
What kind of response have you gotten, if any, from the people that were involved with the series, be it anybody that's still around from behind the scenes or the actors themselves?
Well, Nimoy, as you know, he called me after book 1 came out, and we put his quote on the back of one of these books, I think, or it's on the website, that he said the research was astounding and really congratulating us on it. Grace Lee Whitney said she was in tears when she read it because it brought her back. It really put her right back in those rooms. Because I tell you even what color paint they used in the rooms. And Walter Koenig says it's the first one that is the absolute truth, and you really know what they went through making the show and so forth. William Shatner hasn't commented to me directly, but somebody came over to our table at the convention in Vegas in August. Somebody who was on the staff, and he came over and said, "Shatner said I have to buy this book." So I'll take that as a good endorsement. But what most of them tell me, and this includes a lot of the guest stars and people, what they say is, now we know what was going on in the other room, because they all know what was going on in their perspective, and you can read about that in their individual books. But they didn't know what was going on. So, for instance, a lot of these actors, the guest stars and so forth, had no idea about what the controversy of the script went through getting developed. Robert Brown had no idea that why John Drew Barrymore quit. He was given a different story. He didn't realize it was because the script was rewritten, and he didn't know John Drew Barrymore was put on trial at SAG and couldn't work for a year, had a SAG card taken away from him, which started his downhill spiral. So they didn't know the whole story. So that's the main response I get from everybody is they call up and say, this is great. Now I know what was happening. It wasn't just me going through hell. It was everybody. And
now, do you Terry and I have had Terry. You know where I'm headed, right?
I think I do. Go for it.
Do you think that some others that were on the show, some people that were on the show, regulars, now may understand why some other people felt the way they did, or also protected their spot the way they did?
I had dinner with Nichelle Nichols a few weeks ago, I guess. It was a month ago. And she talked so well of William Shatner. I mean, it's like she's let it all go, whatever, because now she knows. See, a lot of them thought Shatner was taking their lines away from them, and I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
Because he liked to rewrite and he liked to direct, and he was a multi-talented person, still is. But most of those things where they would see a nice part for themselves in the first draft, and then by the time they did the shooting script, they had been written out. They were blaming Shatner, and then they found out from the memos in these books that was coming from NBC, and it was coming from Justman, and it was coming from Fontana. They said, well, we can't have this be a Sulu love story. It should be a Spock love story, This Side of Paradise, or we can't have it be It was somebody else in Wolf in the Fold. I think was it Sulu. I think that was supposed to have been the Jack the Ripper, and they said, no, if we're gonna do this, let's give it to Scotty because we want to give him bigger parts. And so they kept seeing their parts taken away from him, and they just all thought it was Shatner because he was the only guy there to have the clout to do that. Mm-hmm. But those decisions were being made in the front office. So yeah, she just talked so glowingly of Bill Shatner. It really made me feel good, and it would have made him feel good.
Yeah. Let's see. There was.
Did that bother you? Would you rather we talk Shatner down?
No. That makes me feel really good. Just because it's also been 50 years.
Yeah.
Or, coming up on 50 years. And hopefully this helps people
heal,
get closure. Yeah.
Especially because we're going to be coming up on the 50 years. I would love, I don't think there's a fan out there who wouldn't love to see everybody look like they're getting along. I want
to see George Takei and Bill Shatner hug each other.
And mean it. Mean it.
Hold on for like a whole minute.
Well, one thing I did appreciate about the book 3 so far is you've gone and you have a lot more detail or a lot more information about what it was that some of the behind the scenes guys went through in terms of like audio, in terms of some of the editing. There was a whole section dedicated to the special effects in creating the web in Tholian Web.
Yeah. Well, I think that was because of one of you. Maybe you, Michael. Didn't you turn me on to Grinstaff?
Yes, I did recommend, and I had put you in touch with his granddaughter and I'm glad to see that you two actually got hooked up and were able to talk, and some of those interviews made it into the book.
GNT pump.
That's what we're proud of. That's exactly it.
And I didn't even give you a thank you. No
problem.
But I do thank you now because that turned out terrific, and that's what happened is with each book, I was just buried going through the show files like a mole, just loving it, digging. but then people who read book 1 would come forward and say, hey, why don't you talk more about the sound effects and whatever, and I would get connected into more and more people. So yeah, as each book came along, I was able to expand on some of those subjects.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, like I said, getting that glimpse into what it took to create, for example, the Tholian Web. That guy, he sat there and hand etched every single frame. I mean,
Mike Miner.
Yeah,
and he'd never done it before. That was his first time. He had been building the props. He was the guy who did the Melkoshian for Spectre of the Gun, and he
Still
was doing
to me one of the most underrated episodes.
Yeah, it was Spectre of the Gun.
Yeah,
I love that. Sue Osborne. One of the reasons I wanted her to be the editor on these books, I ended up giving her a credit on the front of the book, because it's written by me with her, because she didn't really write them, let's be honest. But she gave me such good notes and such good feedback over the course of 6 years of doing these 3 books, and which really helped shape them. But she didn't know Star Trek too well. She'd seen it a few times when she was young. She worked in the TV industry, knows TV inside and out, but didn't know Star Trek inside and out. So I wanted her to be the editor, because then I said, look, if this isn't interesting to you, let's take it out. I don't want it just to be interesting to people who love Star Trek. I want it to be interesting to anybody who's interested in what it takes to make a TV show. And she was really a big help to me in that respect. So everything you see in these books is in there because she didn't draw an X through it.
Wow.
And I asked her in the 3rd book, I said, this one's going to be bigger than the other 2. How come you're not drawing more X's? And she just said, I'm really getting into it all. But she loved a lot of the 3rd season episodes, because I kept warning her. I said, you're not going to like these as much. And I ran her Spectre of the Gun, and she had already seen most of the 1st and 2nd season. I'd shown her those episodes over the course of a couple of years. And she said, I like this better than any episode you've shown me so far. She was blown away, and she wasn't even doing drugs. But see, she used to do set decorating in the early days, and she's a former producer and writer from TV, but she also did a lot of set decorating and stuff, and she designed the covers for these 3 books too. So she's got graphic arts background and everything else. So she really appreciated the art design in that episode, and she appreciated the off the wall way of telling the story, and off the wall way of showing the telling of the story.
Now, a question, and God, we've talked in person and several times and here on the show, but something I've always wondered. You, were there days where you sat down, especially in the beginning, and let's say you went in at 8 in the morning, and then it would be like 7 at night, and someone would say, Mark, are you going to eat? And you just lost all track of time and everything because you had such a wealth of information to go through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How
the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no. I never ever stop that early at night. No, seriously, I'd be at my desk at 8 in the morning. I'd get up around 7 and run the dogs around and sometimes take a shower and sometimes eat and sometimes whatever. But I'd be at my desk by 8 in the morning and I wouldn't stop until 8 o'clock. And that's usually when there'd be the little knock on the door saying, look, you know, do you want to go out with the dogs and eat? You want to come out sooner or later? 12 hours to me would be the normal day. And because I love it. And time just flies. You lose track of time when you're so deeply involved in digging through all these papers and archived newspaper articles and various interviews and putting all the elements together. You know, it speeds by and you go, oh, damn, the day's over already.
You can see the love and effort that you put into these books. It's there. You can really see it and feel it as you're reading it. I mean, there's just so much information that you had to go through and process, and then, you know, because it's not simply, you know, here are the facts, you know, you're presenting it in a very interesting way. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but
I know what you're saying. It's a biography. It's a biography of a TV show. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do, and I did it with I Spy, and I'm doing it now with. I'm also afraid to tell you, Irwin Allen in Lost in Space for the 50th anniversary. What a fascinating guy! And again, I had to know, when was the decision made to go from a serious kind of version of Swiss Family Robinson in outer space to a situation comedy?
Take the boy.
And how did the cast feel about that? And how did this script get by? And everything, because it's more fun writing about stuff that doesn't work, you know? And I loved the show because I started watching that. That came on the year before Star Trek, and I was a kid. Yeah. So I always had a place in my heart for the show, but I always had a lot of questions, and nobody else has ever answered them. So it's like, okay, the show files exist. They're over at UCLA, and most of the cast is still with us and everything. So I just thought, I'm just going to take the plunge, and I won't spend 2 years doing it, but I'll spend several months and just find out the secrets behind that and who Irwin Allen really was. And I'm having a ball. I got to tell you, partly because it's not serious. It's not as serious. Right after I turn this one in, I got to finish the fourth Star Trek book. And that one's half written, but I had to take a break because Star Trek is very serious stuff. Yeah. Occasionally you have a trouble with tribbles, but even that was serious stuff when you read book 2 and you see what happened between Roddenberry and Kuhn because of that episode, you know? Right. So it's very serious stuff, and I just had to take a break and do something that was a little lighter.
Cleanse the palate, so to speak.
Cleanse the palate, exactly.
But you know, whatever it is, if you dig enough and you turn stones over, there's such interesting stuff under there. So yeah, I do like it, but I try to write them as a biography. So you're in the room and you're just seeing all this happening around you. It's not, as you said, a list of information. Even when we put the Nielsen reports in there, it's not to hit you with too much technical stuff. It's just to give you a sense of how many people were watching that night.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's really fascinating stuff. What is it about book 3 that you enjoyed writing about the most, or what little tidbit that you tripped across that you yourself didn't expect surprised you the most?
It was my favorite book. You know, each one I liked better than the one before.
Is that because the I guess the pressure and the conflict behind the scenes amped up more and more?
Yeah. I mean, as a writer, look, we don't want conflict in our lives, but we sure want it in our stories. And I didn't want to make anything up. I didn't want to invent anything. I just wanted to be a reporter and show you what went on. And I knew there was a lot of conflict and drama in getting the show launched. We all knew that because the first pilot got canceled, and it was the most expensive pilot ever made, and so on. But, you know, I found out happily when I started doing book 2 that the conflict had accelerated, and not just, you know, you're coming into season 2 in book 2, and you got Nimoy's been nominated for an Emmy for season 1, and Shatner hasn't. How's that going to go down?
Right.
Nimoy's getting more fan mail than Shatner. Yet Shatner's the star of the show, and not just the star of the show, but Kirk is the protagonist of the show.
Right.
And every script's got to be about Kirk and Kirk's problem. Even if it's a Spock episode, it's really a Kirk episode dealing with Spock's problem. And so how's that going to go down? And then with Gene Kuhn leaving, and then it killed me to find this out, that, NBC would wait until they were in the middle of filming the last episode that had been ordered before letting them know if they're going to be working next week. And they did that in the second season when they were filming Gamesters and Triskelion. And they did it in the third season twice, because they'd give them a 2-episode renewal. And they'd wait until they were in the middle of that second episode before they'd say if they wanted 9 more.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about, you just don't even know if you're going to be back next week, and yet you got to be writing scripts. And so interesting, this is how brilliant the producers were. And like in the second season, they said, well, we don't know if we're going to be filming next week. So they did the immunity syndrome, because they wouldn't need any guest stars and they wouldn't need any other sets. So they thought, well, if we find out, if we get the pickup, we can all come back Monday and we can just start filming, because it'll just be right on stage 9.
Wow.
And they did the same thing in season 3. They had to plan an episode that they could just come back into without any preparation, because they weren't going to have time to do any preparation. So talk about the pressure.
No kidding.
And there's somewhere in book 3, a couple of you probably haven't gotten there yet. Well, I know you haven't, Terry, because you said you haven't.
I'm in 2. Yep.
But where Fred Freiberger, who was the real studio guy, he never criticized the studio. He even took the blame with Ralph Sinesky and so forth. Really tried to bring the show in on budget, try to write the scripts or rewrite the scripts, downwrite the scripts to be able to get shot within budget. And yet at the halfway point, right around the time Bob Justman left, Fred broke, and he was giving an interview to LA Times writer, and you see the article in there from the LA Times, and he's just fuming. He's saying it's sadistic. It was what Roddenberry said the year before. He said,
wow.
It's sadistic the way the networks treat us. He said, here we are halfway through our 16th episode, and we don't know if we're working next week. Yet me and Art Singer are rewriting the script, and
you have to wonder.
You can't tell the actors if they should be looking for other work. He said, this is so cruel.
And it is, and it was, and you have to really wonder how much there really was some kind of a personal vendetta or even just a perverse delight being taken by some of the network executives in how they treated
That's
other.
A very astute comment, because it's the way TV worked back then. All the shows kind of went through this, but with Star Trek it was worse. I don't know of any other show that got a 2-episode pickup. Instead of saying, okay, we'll take 10 more episodes, they said, we'll take 2 and we'll let you know in a couple of weeks if we'll take the other 8.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if they had tried to do that to Lucy and Desi on their show?
Yeah, it would never fly. I've never had that happening, and yet Star Trek in particular, being science fiction, they needed more lead time to prepare these. They had to make costumes and find props and build sets. It wasn't just going to be All in the Family where we're going to be in the bunker's house next week, the same week.
That's corporate passive aggressive at its finest.
Totally, because they were very angry at Roddenberry. Another thing you find out in book 3 is that when all those fans rebelled and NBC was forced into picking the show up for a 3rd season, the decision was made within NBC that there would not be a 4th season. Mm-hmm. No, but even if the show did well in the ratings, they were determined that it was going to be the last year. They said, well, we got to pick it up. They've embarrassed us in public. They've embarrassed us in front of our shareholders. We've got to find a way to alienate this show from its audience. We've got to find a way to kill it. And we've got to be ready next year to pull the rug out from under the fans when they start to protest. And so it was a very orchestrated way of killing Star Trek. And yet one year later...
We'll show them. We won't make any more money.
Yeah, and 1 year later, those same executives, the same network is on their knees in front of Paramount saying, please give it back to us. We were wrong.
How ironic.
So there is a lot of kind of passive aggressiveness that goes on in the industry. Like, you made me suffer, now I'm going to make you suffer.
Well, NBC has always had, if anybody listening is a fan of Saturday Night Live, you look at the first 5 years of what Lorne Michaels went through at times. Now, did he, like Gene Roddenberry, there's times where he brought it on himself, most definitely. But again, it had to, there's some parallels there. Things with the censors, things with guests and skits / stories, all of that. But NBC is, they're a weird network, even to this day.
They really are.
With you.
Well, look what they did with Conan O'Brien and the Jay Leno thing.
But you know what? I was definitely in the whole. I am a huge Conan O'Brien fan, but I'm going to say the route that they took was totally and completely the wrong route. But I'm so happy that Jimmy Fallon is the host now.
Yeah.
He's as throwback to Johnny Carson as we're ever going to get.
Yeah, I agree. But still, the way they treated those guys.
Oh, yeah.
It was just horrible. But that's typical of the industry, certain aspects of the industry, not everybody. There's a lot of wonderful people in this industry. And some of the best people I've ever met in my life are in show business, and some of the worst people I've met are in show business. But it's mostly the people who run the businesses, run the studios, and run the networks. They're the ones you get most of the trouble from. They just don't care.
Is there anyone, a person that you would like to do a biography of? Because I'm just going to throw a name in the hat.
Yeah.
His name is Nick Minette. No. I would love to see you, because of your background, do the Mark Leonard biography.
Oh, yeah. That would be interesting. It really would. Because I was the one who said to Roddenberry, let's bring him back. I found out in my lunch with Dorothy the other day that Dorothy had suggested that when she was at Next Generation. She said, let's do a Sarek episode. And Gene said no. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to tie the two shows together. And then when I was in there during the second season and proposed it, he went for it. It was because I proposed it. I said, I wonder what happens to a Vulcan when he goes through senility. And that's what caught his attention. And then I said, I know you like Mark Leonard, and he's now the age that you need him to be. He's got gray hair now. You don't have to put on fake gray hair. And so he said, do it. But then he changed his mind, and he told me to rewrite it and take Sarek out and put in a different Vulcan, which just killed me. So I handed it off to a guy that I'd been doing some scripts with, Jake Jacobs, and I asked him to rewrite it, which is how his name got on there, because I said, I'm not going to do that, because it just ruins it for me. So he rewrote it, but then Mike Pillar came in and said, no, let's put Sarek back in. So it kind of came and went, but I didn't realize Dorothy had that idea too.
Now, do you have a personal favorite single Mark Leonard in Star Trek scene? Because I certainly have one that just, when I think of him, and believe it or not, for those that listen and know my predilections, it is not him as the Romulan commander.
Yeah, that was his favorite. He loved that character because it was such a noble and tragic, a noble character in a tragic situation. Two noble captains, and one of them's got to lose.
That's my favorite episode of him, but the scene that always makes me, when I think of Mark Leonard, it's at the end of The Voyage Home, when he and Spock meet after the trial.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. That is so gripping. I watched that not too long ago because book 4 covers us through that period too. Book 4, let me tell you right now. Book 4 takes us from September 1969 through into 1985. It's a 15-year voyage. And why? I'll tell you why. Because among my research, among my interviews, somebody told me an amazing story, and I got it confirmed. I'm not going to tell you the details. It's too good of a story. I got to make you wait to read it. But I will tell you this much.
That's called a promo, kids.
Gene Roddenberry, who owned 25% of the show, never saw a dime until 1975, and he managed to get it by tricking Paramount. Now, and it has something to do with Next Generation, but I won't tell you the actual scene because the scene is so classic. You're going to have to wait to read it and experience it. But that, to me, is when the story of Star Trek TOS finally wraps. Now, it continues. We do a few more movies, and they make guest appearances on Next Generation and things of that nature. But the torch got handed off at that point, and the creator is finally allowed to get a paycheck for this ownership that he has that the studio had been claiming was still in red ink. Yeah, right. And so it didn't really get resolved. That's what made me realize I had to write a fourth book, because I just figured that Roddenberry was collecting money the minute it went into syndication. I didn't realize that he and Shatner were getting screwed all the way up until 1985. And so there's this battle that spanned 15 years. And in that battle, NBC's trying to get the show back, which led us to the animated series. It's the only way they could get it. And people were knocking NBC saying, why don't they put it back in prime time? And they wanted it back in prime time. That's the only way Paramount would give it to them. And that's what got us to Phase 2, and that's what got us to Star Trek the Motion Picture. And Then Wrath of Khan was supposed to be a TV movie, which was going to serve as a pilot for a new series, and yet they decided to make it, when they saw the script, they decided to make it as a movie. So it's just so much fascinating stuff that I never knew about. And
I'm really interested to read the Phase 2 parts, because I read the book about Phase 2 a couple of years ago, and how that led into the motion picture and all of that. But I think Phase 2 is one of those things that a lot of fans just don't have an inkling about.
Right.
And seeing the screen tests of Perseus Kambata in the uniforms and things like that. And God, she was...
Well, and
left us way too early.
And I like that book, and I've got it, of course. And I was so thrilled when somebody actually wrote a book about it 15 years ago or whenever it came out. But it's like most books that are written about TV shows. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do a biography on a TV show. That's what I do. That's my stamp. And that's how I want to see it. I want to see it as part of a biography on the continuing story of Star Trek, because they weren't able to didn't interview a lot of the principals. Like, Walter Koenig's got some very interesting stories to tell about Phase 2 and so on. So, you want to get all those voices in there. So and you go through the show files and find out all the deep levels of thinking that was going on. But that's the only book we got, and I love it. But I'm hoping to take it up a notch. So Phase 2, the animated series, the Roddenberry pilots from the 70s. I even got a chapter about Space 1999 and Fred Freiberger going over there, because it kind of follows the principal Star Trek people, because they couldn't get away from Star Trek. He got that job because he had produced Star Trek. So it wouldn't be right to tell the rest of the Star Trek story and not mention Fred Freiberger over at Space 1999, and there was a lot of conflict and drama over there. So there's just all these aspects that kind of weave together as we tell that final fourth chapter, in a sense, of the story of TOS, which will continue to live after the end of the fourth book in the last few movies and so on. But that really takes you full circle, with Roddenberry finally getting his payday and them saying, let's get Star Trek back on TV.
Wow.
What do you think of the news that Space 1999 is going to get rebooted?
Good. It's a great concept, and it certainly had its pluses for its time.
Yeah.
The first season, the characters were a little bland. Freiberger came in and shook that up. You should see his memos. I think you may have seen a couple of them. There's a couple that are online, but Peter Greenwood's connected me with some stuff and so forth, and he really came in and said, the characters are bland. We got to make them more human, make them more interesting. But then they said, well, we need a Spock type character. So he came up with Maya. So, so there were things that were better about first year. There were things that were better about the second year. There were things that were bad about both years. But it certainly had its moments, and it was the only science fiction show being produced in the middle of the 70s. Everybody was crying for Star Trek, and they couldn't get it. So we at least got something.
So amazing. So amazing.
The Eagle is one of the iconic ships of science fiction.
Oh, without a doubt.
There's something very, very iconic and appealing about Space 1999.
Yeah.
It misfires on a lot of levels, but so did Lost in Space. But there's something very iconic and interesting about that. It's just high concept science fiction is fascinating.
Well, one thing that's lost, I think, now, but maybe because of things like Netflix and like Terry, you and I have discussed, and Mike on the show, if Paramount does their own streaming service or whatever, and if all the studios start to do that, shows like The Time Tunnel, or Land of the Giants.
Yeah.
All these shows that are really lost, that I can see some of our listeners going, what is that?
Yeah.
Shows from that time frame, or UFO. Remember UFO?
Of course.
And those shows that, it's too bad there's not a network.
Like Sci-Fi Channel should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Although they have just been running all these old things. And even run the old Buck Rogers serials from the 1930s. Wouldn't that be a hoot?
Have we fragmented to the point where it's just better to put those things out on DVD or a streaming service, because the network might not make enough money off of it, something like a Sci-Fi Network, because the numbers wouldn't be there, but yet they would be able to sell enough? Am I making sense in this? Where it's niche enough enough that they could do that and make money off of it, but it may not.
They do make enough. They do make enough, and it's a shame. It's totally. You look at all these channels on cable, Biography Channel, A&E, so all these channels that had an imprint a decade ago, that had a distinctive personality. Bravo, they all had a distinctive personality. You knew what you could get from them, and you could only get it from them. And now they all look alike. Even History Channel, they're all doing reality shows, and it's like, how is this on History Channel? Oh, I get it. It's they're out looking for antiques. So they're saying, well, it's got history to the antiques, but it's just another variation of pawn shop, And it's a shame and here's why: is because they want more money. They're not content to make a nice little profit. They want to make massive amounts of money, so they want to get a massive audience instead of a niche audience.
Right.
It's a shame. I think we should all start the channel. We should all start a little channel.
G&T channel.
Hey, we could get a lot of those shows for next to nothing.
Think we could do it on a Kickstarter fund?
GTTV?
I wish somebody would do a Kickstarter for that. Because it's like MeTV, exactly. It's like those stations.
I do love MeTV.
Those stations usually start, and they're not very expensive because they'll pick up shows that they're getting for next to nothing because the shows have been sitting untouched in the vaults of the studios for decades. And they put them on, and it doesn't cost them anything.
Well, TV Land used to have Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and all. Now it's more shows from the 90s.
Do it too.
Yeah, there's nothing to see. The All in the Families, the Maude, the older.
I Love Lucy.
Yeah, sitcoms, and I think that is on.
I Love Lucy's on MeTV.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
And Gilligan's Island.
Where's F Troop?
But, sci-fi, if we did a sci-fi superstation, you could get, Star Trek, you could get Lost in Space, Time Tunnel, Land of the Giants, The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, you could get the old Buck Rogers serials, you could get the Munsters, and the Addams Family would fit in very nicely on a sci-fi channel,
Mm-hmm. Every day at lunch, you play Dark Shadows, so people have their soap opera to watch.
Absolutely.
Because that's what I used to do at lunch when I was stationed at Fort Gordon in the 90s. We would all gather in the back office, and it was like 4 women and 4 guys, and we had our show. We sounded like a bunch of old people. We're watching our show, but it was Dark Shadows. In black and white.
I'm watching my show.
In black and white.
We should talk to the guys over at the Saturn Awards. I saw them at the Shrine a few weeks ago, or about a week ago, last weekend I think it was. I was there signing, and Robert and Marcus Brothers came up and he said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, Irwin Allen, Lost in Space, just as a little sideline. Then I'm getting back on Star Trek, and they said, "We love that show." Cool.
Irwin Allen.
They were so excited. And so, we should talk to them and put a bug in their ear. Wouldn't it be
Oh my God, it'd be awesome.
Wouldn't it be very cool?
A really true to form genre.
For them to have a station, because there's science fiction, fantasy, and horror. What if there was a station that was sponsored by the Science Fiction Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films and TV? That would be nothing but...
You heard it here first, folks. We have an idea, okay?
Terry, I don't know
and we need a Kickstarter.
I would leave my job for us to host that.
Well, we'll all get jobs there, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in.
I'm game.
And we'll put on movies, and we'll put on TV shows, and they can go all the way back to the 40s, 1940s.
Nick can be the Svengoolie of our channel.
No, my friend Andrea and I...
There you go.
We have discussed for a long time...
Their own version of mystery...
Science theater, but live tweeting it every
live tweeting, that's
live
great.
tweeting our snark on a
also,
show.
the old Vampirus and Mona Lisa.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if those shows still exist because
Svengoolie does.
It was fun watching in Seymour here in L.A. They had the late night Saturday movies where they show bad horror films, and the stuff in between was so delightful.
Mark, there's a documentary about that.
I wonder if there's a fault with those things. Man.
Yeah, there's a documentary on Netflix about those shows.
Okay, so anyone listening, we're looking for funding.
Yes.
We'll do a Kickstarter. We'll try to get the Saturn people involved. It could be called the Saturn Channel.
It's now trademarked, folks. You can't have it. It's theirs. It's theirs. Okay.
That's right.
Oh my God.
This is a poor man's way of trademarking stuff. Is you announce it in a public forum, so it's indisputable where the idea came.
It's going to have a timestamp on it.
Now, because we've talked about Irwin Allen, it just takes me back. Here's something that I know Mark and Terry will remember, and I'm sure
his name was.
Well, here's another one.
Synonymous with disasters, and not in a bad way, right?
And I'll take date, and I'll get this: a Quinn Martin production.
Quinn Martin production.
You just reminded me of the Invaders.
Yeah. Oh,
that was a QM production. That was a good
my
show.
God.
She was.
And the Immortal. Remember the Immortal with Christopher George?
And the Avengers.
And what was the Richard Benjamin sitcom sci-fi from the 70s?
Quark.
Gotta get that on. That probably cost $20 to get those episodes.
What was the one with Andy Griffin? Salvage One.
Oh my God!
But we will not.
My childhood as we speak.
Okay, but we got to do some original programming too. And here's what I want to do. You want to do your sci-fi?
Yeah. What do you want to do?
Tweet up. Yeah.
I want to do a series of specials based on my book series. So do a half hour making of every episode of the original Star Trek.
Oh my God.
And then you can show the episode.
It's kind of like Talking Dead, but for TOS.
Yeah.
It would be like a Ken Burns fun.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ken Burns. So we would have people who do good impressions. Like there's somebody who does a great Roddenberry voiceover, and have them reading the memos, and you can put their picture up on screen as you're hearing the little memo stuff read. And you get to show clips because, and everything else. So and behind the scenes photographs, and do it like Ken Burns would do.
That'd be awesome.
Do a 30-minute special for each episode, and then you roll right into the episode.
God, that's awesome.
Okay.
Do you realize that because of you, Mark, I am now going to spiral into drugs and alcohol when this doesn't happen? And I'm going to blame you. I'm going to blame you. I'm going to become, Sid Vicious by the end.
Oh, I love it.
All right.
Oh, Mark. Well, I hate to tie this up. Once again, we're having such a wonderful conversation, but we have reached the end of our time.
And we'll talk to you again before Vegas, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have you on again for sure.
Just once?
I love you.
At least.
You have an open invitation.
Well, you're going to have me on again when you finish reading book 3, so we can have an intelligent conversation about it, okay?
Yes.
Have an intelligent conversation?
Gotcha. Got me.
I did my part, at least for half.
Yes. This is awesome. And,
it'll be intelligent on your end. My end is never intelligent.
One thing I do want to point out to our listeners is if you get These Are the Voyages in ebook format, and this is one of the few books anymore not one of the few books, but this is one of the books I would say you do want to get these in a hardcover.
You really do.
For the scope. But if you do get it in ebook, it is not compatible with Kindle, Nook, or iBook. You can view it on your PC or Mac laptop, but I just wanted the people to understand that if they wanted to get it in ebook.
I think it may be compatible with iBook. I heard that, or maybe they said iPad. They said something.
On the website, it says not compatible with Kindle, Nook, or iBook.
Okay, so I guess maybe they meant iPad or something. But because there was an something they said it will work with.
Yeah, probably like the iPad because then
through the browser, it will work on your tablet through the browser.
Here's the problem with Kindle. Do I have time to give a little rant on Kindle?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
This is why we were so late in putting book 2 out on Kindle, and this is why book 3 is not planned for Kindle at the moment, because I've been fighting it, because a couple things. First of all, Kindle doesn't format the thing very well. The pictures that are supposed to be small are big, and they don't have the resolution to support it. The pictures are supposed to be are big or small. The text under the pictures you can't tell apart from the rest of the text, so it gets very confusing. And every time Bob Justman in one of his memos says, on page 37, I don't like the way Kirk says this, instead of it saying page 37, there's a blue thing that says here, and if you click on it, it takes you to page 37 in the book. And you can't get them to fix these things. I've gone through these books so many times and sent them notes with a problem almost every page, saying fix this, fix that, and they'll fix some of them and create other problems in trying to fix them.
Oh my God,
and I get so angry, and then a week after it comes out on Kindle, you're finding the book available as a free download. Some pirate site, it's a crappy download, and you're going to get viruses by going there, and it serves you right. But the thing is Kindle doesn't even check their stuff, and we'll call them up and say, why do you do that? And they say, because we're Amazon and we can do whatever we like. So, it's like, I don't want to give them Booker, but you can get an ebook version of it. You may not be able to watch it on your Kindle player, but it's just difficult. And they take so much of the money. They take 2/3 of the money as a commission. And of the third that is left of that $10 we're selling it for or whatever, the third that's left, they take part of that too because they charge the publisher by the size of the file that they have to download. And these books are so big and have, like, book 3 has over 400 images in it, all high resolution.
Right.
The file size is so massive that by the time Kindle's taken all their fees, we're making like $1 a book.
Which is exactly why we're telling everybody, buy the hardcover.
Buy the hardback.
Trust me, the pictures are beautiful.
And it comes signed.
And I'll autograph it to you.
Exactly.
And I'll write you a poem in it or something.
Mark, I usually try and throw kind of a bizarre question your way, so I have one for you this episode.
All right.
Are you a cat or a dog person?
I have 3 dogs. I used to have cats, but not anymore.
I was just curious.
Right on.
Yeah, why?
What kind of dogs do you have?
They're all rescue dogs and all mutts. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
I used to have Shelties before they inbred them so much that they became crazy. But I've always had dogs. I grew up on a farm, and I just, a dog is your best friend. They'll listen to everything you tell them.
Yep.
Your wife or girlfriend will walk out of the room halfway through a sentence. The dog will sit there and listen to everything.
And they're genuinely
cats
happy
just don't
when you
even
come
look you
home.
in the eye. They just kind of turn their back to you,
And dogs are genuinely happy when you come home.
Oh my God! They throw a party I start to leave the house and I forget something, and I'll come right back in, and they throw a party like I've been gone for 3 hours.
I get that. The where I live, the guy has a Sheltie, and it doesn't matter if I go out to my car because I forgot something in it, or I've been gone, up to Connecticut for 2 weeks over the holidays. When I come back, it's the same response. You're back!
I thought you were gone forever.
Yeah.
But why did you ask me?
It's just one of those things that I find interesting just because
he gets these things every so often that you just kind of go, yeah, that's a new question. He just genuine curiosity.
My parents raised English bulldogs, but when I grew up, we had a full sled dog team of Siberian Huskies, and I grew up very much in a dog house. But as I've gotten older, I've come to really enjoy the and I think it's going to be our first curse today, the fuck you nature of cats. And I'm really convinced that the alien overlords are here, and we are serving them, and they are cats.
You know what? I love all animals, and I don't love all people, but I do love squirrels. And I've befriended all the squirrels in the backyard. One comes up to my office door and gets on its hind legs and looks in because there's no peanuts out there, And so I'll open the door and the thing comes in and gets the peanut right out of my hand. So they become so, it's like, give me my food. I want it now. And it's from when I was a kid on a farm. I just love animals. And so I even love cats. But I prefer having the dogs because they do throw those parties for me. And they alert me when somebody's breaking in, that. The cat would just sit there and watch you get beaten to death. But the dog will actually whine a little bit.
Now, I think what I'd like, Mark, is for us to choose among all of us together an episode or a Star Trek film and all watch it and then have you on where we just break it down.
Okay. What one do you want to do?
Terry, Mike, any thoughts? Into Darkness. No.
Well,
I care not.
We do an episode from the first show only because we'll have the insight. I'll have the insight of some behind the scenes stuff. If you want that.
I love that idea.
How about a piece of the action?
Sounds like fun.
And the reason I say that is because Continues is going to do their.
Oh.
Did you see the post where they found a car to use?
No.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I thought that was just for the Kirk starter.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were doing an episode.
No.
As a follow-on. Okay.
No, Vic wanted to pose in front of the car and found it. He thought it'd be good for the Kickstarter thing. I was trying to talk him into doing a Mud episode because he knows a guy who would be a perfect Harry Mudd, and I know Stephen Kando who wrote the Mud episodes. So I said, let's do a Mud episode, but he doesn't like Mud, so I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think Vic's going to want to do a comedy.
Well, I say let's do the Enterprise incident because anybody can do a Klingon episode.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine, Nick. I say
But
we can do the
Romulan episode.
I think it's fine. The Enterprise incident would be lovely. I like that one.
Well, and Mike, as you know, it also leads into some of the novels.
If we're all talking on Skype like we do, are you able to plug in a phone call?
Yeah.
Because maybe I'll see if Joanne Linville will come on and talk for a few minutes. We're going to do
Romulan Commander?
Yeah.
As Nick restarts breathing here.
Yeah.
I have a tear.
Now and Michael, don't start doing drugs if she says no. Well, I'll just reach out to her and see if she'll pop on.
That would be awesome. We love that.
Yeah, just
because I interviewed her for the book, and so she was very willing to talk.
That would be freaking amazing. That really would be. Well, I will cross my fingers.
One quick question before we go. Do you know if there are any plans to put the hardcover on Amazon anytime soon?
Yes. It was shipped to Amazon this morning.
Oh, okay. So we should be seeing it there sometime in the next month, maybe.
Yeah. I'm hoping they'll have it available. The plan was always that they would start selling it on February 1st, and they'll certainly have it there by then. Yeah. Amazon sometimes takes a long time to scan the stuff in.
Right.
Probably not too long. You know, if it's like near Christmas, forget it. But in February, hopefully it won't be too busy down there, and they'll get it scanned in pretty quick. So it may show up in the first couple of days. You know, you can buy it now.
Yes.
By going to thesearethevoyagesbooks.com.
Sweet.
Or jacobsbrownmediagroup.com. And all those
links
books
will be in our show notes.
All those books get autographed by me.
And as you didn't hear what Michael said, but all of the links that Mark just mentioned regarding how you can get an autographed copy of These Are the Voyages will be in the show notes. So as you're listening to this at our website, if you look down, the links will be there. So all you have to do is click on them. You might want to right-click and hit open in a new tab so you don't cut off what we're talking about, but I'm just saying.
But if you prefer to buy it, if you prefer to buy it from Amazon, they should have it in the first few days of February. Up for sale. And I'm not, and you know, and it may show up on Kindle within a few weeks, but I hope not.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. We always enjoy talking with you and appreciate the effort that you do to sit down and talk with us about your wonderful books. Anything we can do, as always, to support These Are the Voyages, you just let us know.
Send me some money. No, I want to do that thing with you guys. I definitely, we got to do that.
The network?
We got to do the Saturn Network. I'm gonna send an email to the Saturn guys tomorrow.
We're there.
And
we're on board.
I'll tell them we got a staff already.
I'll tell them the salary I make now, and they just need to match it.
We're cheap.
If I tell them what salary I make now, they'll laugh at me.
They got to double it.
Not in the good way.
They got to double it. What was that a line from a Star Trek episode? Twice nothing is still nothing.
Yeah,
that's about right.
Trouble with Tribbles. Trouble with Tribbles. Yeah, that's right. When they were discussing the price of a Tribble. Is that your offer or is that a joke?
Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Mark. It's been a pleasure.
See y'all later.
Bye, Mark.
You'll come back.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Marc Cushman, who it's always a pleasure to have him on. I can't say enough about Mark.
I love him. I just love him. He's a great guy, wonderful to talk to, a wonderful writer. We always have just a great time talking with him, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation with him as well. After we can
give you the startup dates for the network then.
That's right, the startup dates for the network. Yeah, as we all go, wouldn't that totally be the coolest?
Oh yeah.
Hard on.
I'm going to do some research now.
That's great. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. Nick, you want to take us out?
Once again, thank you to Marc Cushman. These Are the Voyages, seasons 1, 2, and 3. I honestly, 5 stars all around. Not saying that because he's a friend of the show, saying that because it really is that damn good.
It deserves
Saturn
every
Award
single one
winning.
Yes. Nebula as well, right?
I don't know.
Did he win a Nebula? Or was it the Saturn he got last year?
Got the Saturn.
I think it's the Saturn. Saturn is
for achievement. And people, you don't
Special
understand.
achievement.
They don't give
them
out
to
Saturns for nonfiction.
Right. They don't give them out to writers.
Yeah. So, that should tell you something. So there she is, looking resplendent as always, Terry.
Hello and goodbye. Or live long and prosper.
Yeah. Klingon.
Kapla.
Jolan True, bitches.
Music for the G&T show is provided by Warp 11, Grethor, 5 Year Mission, and Andrew Allen's Smooth Federation.
GNT show is a Busy Little Beaver production.